I'd been in the army long enough to know that Saturday nights in the barracks usually went one of two ways: boring as hell, or the kind of crazy that got you in Article 15. That night started off somewhere in the middle. The four of us, me, Tyler, Grady, and Derek, were sprawled across the common room furniture, already 6 beers deep by 6 in the evening. The plan was simple: drink here where it's cheap, then head downtown where the real fun was. "All I'm saying," Tyler said, his lanky frame draped over the couch, beer bottle dangling from his fingers, "is that Sergeant Willis has it out for me specifically. You guys don't get the same shit I do." Grady snorted, running a hand over his shaved head. "Maybe if you kept your hair within regs, he wouldn't be on your ass all the time." "It's within regs," Tyler protested, pushing his dirty blonde hair back. It definitely wasn't. Derek laughed from his spot on the floor, back against the wall. "Dude, you look like a surfer who wandered into basic by accident." I took another swig of my beer. "Tyler, you've been fighting that battle since day one. Just get a damn haircut." The conversation drifted like it always did. Complaining about officers, comparing notes on the new recruits, debating which bar downtown had the best-looking women. Normal stuff. Safe stuff. The kind of night I'd had 100 times before. Around 9, someone knocked on the door. We all looked at each other. "You expecting someone?" I asked, glancing around. 3 heads shook no. Derek, being closest to the door, got up to answer it. When he pulled it open, I caught my first glimpse of her, tall, with striking red hair that seemed too vibrant to be natural, pale skin that almost glowed under the harsh fluorescent lights of the hallway. "Hi," she said, her voice smooth and even. "I'm Sarah. Can I come in?" Derek hesitated for just a second. We all knew the rules about visitors in the barracks, especially female visitors, after hours. But Derek was Derek. Always the first to bend rules when a pretty face was involved. "Sure," he said, stepping aside. "We're just hanging out." She walked in like she already knew the place. That was the first thing that struck me as odd. No hesitation, no looking around to get her bearings. She moved directly to the mini fridge, opened it, and helped herself to a beer. "Hope you don't mind," she said, twisting off the cap with a quick motion. No problem," Tyler said, sitting up straighter. I noticed he was trying to fix his hair without being obvious about it. "So, Sarah," I said, watching her carefully, "how'd you get on base?" She took a sip of beer before answering. "I have a pass." "From who?" I pressed. She smiled without showing her teeth. "A friend." Cool. Derek jumped in, clearly not wanting to scare her off with too many questions. "So how'd you find our barracks?" "Someone pointed me in the right direction," she said, settling into the only empty chair. Again, no specifics. Something about her made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I couldn't put my finger on it, but something felt wrong. Her movements were too smooth, too calculated. And her eyes, they barely blinked. "You guys are with the 3rd Battalion, right?" she asked, looking around at each of us. "Yeah," Grady answered, his usual quiet self. "How'd you know that?" She shrugged. "Just a guess." The conversation continued, but it felt one-sided. Sarah asked questions, lots of them. Where we were from, how long we'd been stationed here, who our commanding officers were. But whenever we asked about her, she deflected or gave vague answers. "So, Tyler," she said, turning those unblinking eyes toward him, "how's your mom doing after the surgery? Recovering well in Millfield?" Tyler's face went blank with surprise. "How did you know my mom had surgery? Or that I'm from Millfield?" Sarah took another sip of beer. "You must have mentioned it earlier." "I definitely didn't," Tyler said, shooting me a look. "Maybe one of your buddies told me," she suggested, but none of us had. The weird moments kept piling up. She knew Grady had a sister who'd just gotten engaged. She knew which deployment Derek had been on last year. Details none of us had shared that night. When Derek tried to take a group selfie with his phone, something he did constantly, Sarah smoothly moved her head just as he snapped the picture. "Sorry," she said. "I don't photograph well." Derek tried again later, and again she turned away at the exact moment he pressed the button. Around 10:30, Sarah got up to use the bathroom. The second she was out of earshot, I leaned forward. "Guys, something's not right with her," I whispered. "What do you mean?" Derek asked. "She's hot. She knows shit about us she shouldn't know," I said. "And have you noticed she barely blinks? It's creeping me out." "Maybe she looked us up online or something," Tyler suggested, but he didn't sound convinced. "And, how did she get on base?" I pressed. "That story about having a pass is bullshit." Grady nodded slowly. "I noticed that too, and she's cold." "What?" I asked. When she handed me a beer earlier, her hand touched mine. It was ice cold, like unnaturally cold. Before we could discuss it further, Sarah returned. She sat down closer to Tyler this time, her leg almost touching his. "So tell me more about your hometown, Tyler," she said. "Millfield sounds charming, especially that creek behind your old house where you used to fish." Tyler's face went pale. "I never told you about that." Sarah smiled that same closed-lip smile. "Sure you did." The room felt colder somehow. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. Every time I looked directly at Sarah, I felt a wave of nausea. It was like my body was physically rejecting her presence. By 11, I couldn't take it anymore. My head was pounding and my stomach was churning. I stood up abruptly. "I've got to call it a night, guys," I said, trying to sound casual. "Got that thing in the morning." "What thing?" Derek asked, frowning. "That PT test," I lied. "We didn't have any PT test scheduled." "I thought that was next week," Tyler said. "Nope, tomorrow," I insisted. "Anyway, nice meeting you, Sarah." She turned those unblinking eyes on me. "You're leaving already, Marcus. The night's just getting started." I hadn't told her my name. I was sure of it. "Yeah, sorry," I mumbled, already backing toward my room. Early morning. I felt her eyes on me the whole way. When I reached my door, I glanced back one last time. Sarah was watching me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. The others were laughing at something, seemingly oblivious to how wrong everything felt. I slipped into my room and locked the door behind me. My hands were shaking as I sat on the edge of my bed. Through the wall, I could hear their muffled voices continuing the party without me. Part of me felt guilty for abandoning my friends, but a stronger part, the part that had kept me alive through 2 deployments, told me to stay put. I lay back on my bed, still fully dressed, and stared at the ceiling. The sick feeling in my stomach wouldn't go away. Something about Sarah wasn't right. People don't just show up in military barracks knowing personal details about strangers. They don't move the way she moved or look the way she looked. I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe she really did know someone on base. Maybe she'd done some social media stalking before showing up. There had to be a logical explanation. But as I lay there listening to the muffled sounds of my friends talking with a stranger who made my skin crawl, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd made the right choice by locking my door. I woke up to someone pounding on my door. The sound cut through my sleep like a knife, jerking me awake instantly. My heart hammered in my chest as I fumbled for the lamp beside my bed. The clock on my nightstand read 3 in the morning. The pounding continued, more desperate now. "Marcus, open up, man." It was Grady's voice, but something was wrong. He sounded terrified. I jumped out of bed, still fully dressed from earlier when I'd retreated to my room to get away from Sarah. I unlocked the door and pulled it open. "Jesus Christ," I whispered. Grady stood there, his face a mess of blood. 3 long cuts ran from his forehead down across his left cheek. His shirt was soaked with blood, some of it still wet and glistening in the hallway light. "Let me in," he gasped, pushing past me into my room. His hands were shaking so bad he could barely stand straight. "Lock the door." I slammed the door shut and locked it, then turned to face him. "What the hell happened?" Grady sank down onto the edge of my bed, his breathing ragged. "It's Sarah. She's not..." He struggled to find the words. "She's not human, Marcus." "What are you talking about? Where's Tyler and Derek?" "Still in the common room, or they were when I ran." Grady touched the cuts on his face, wincing. "After you left, things got weird. Derek tried to get her to leave around midnight, said we all needed sleep. She wouldn't go, just sat there, smiling." I grabbed a t-shirt from my drawer and handed it to him to press against his face. "Then what?" "Derek tried to take her arm, to walk her out." Grady's voice cracked. "That's when, her face wasn't right anymore. It changed. I can't even describe it. One second she looked normal, the next..." He shook his head. "Her fingers, man. They weren't fingers anymore, more like claws or something." "Grady, how much did you guys drink after I left?" "I'm not drunk," he snapped. "She went for Derek first. Those fingernails cut through him like knives. So much blood. Then she turned on Tyler. I tried to help, but..." He gestured to his face. "She did this with one swipe. I ran, came straight here." I stood there for a moment, trying to process what he was saying. It sounded insane, but the cuts on Grady's face were real, and the fear in his eyes wasn't something you could fake. "We need to go back," I said finally. "We can't leave them there with her." Grady nodded, still pressing the shirt to his face. "I know." I moved to my locker and dialed the combination with shaking fingers. Inside was my service weapon, a Beretta M9. I hadn't fired it outside of the range in months, but my hands remembered the weight of it. I checked the magazine, full, and chambered around. "You got anything I can use?" Grady asked. I looked around my room. Under my bed was a Louisville Slugger I'd bought for the unit softball tournament last summer. I pulled it out and handed it to him. "This'll have to do." Grady took the bat, testing its weight. "Better than nothing." We stood at my door for a moment, listening. The hallway outside was silent. "Ready?" I asked. Grady nodded, his knuckles white around the bat handle. I unlocked the door and eased it open. The hallway lights were still on, but something was different. There was blood on the floor, a lot of it. Handprints smeared the wall, and a trail of red droplets led from the common room toward the exit at the end of the hall. "Fuck," Grady whispered. I raised my weapon, pointing it down the hallway. My training kicked in, pushing the fear to the back of my mind. "Stay behind me," I told Grady. "If you see her, don't hesitate." We moved forward slowly, following the blood trail. Every few feet there was more, smears on the wall, pools on the floor. It looked like someone had been dragged. "Tyler?" I called out softly. "Derek?" No answer. The common room door was partially open. More blood was smeared across it, with what looked like finger marks where someone had tried to hold it closed. I took a deep breath and nudged the door open with my foot, keeping my weapon raised. The room was a disaster. The coffee table was overturned, beer bottles shattered across the floor. One of the chairs was broken, its legs splintered, and the blood. It was everywhere. A large pool had formed near the window, which was now broken outward, shards of glass glinting on the floor. "Tyler!" I called again, louder this time. A groan came from behind the couch. I moved quickly, keeping my gun up, and found Tyler lying there. His arm was bent at an unnatural angle, clearly broken. His chest was covered in deep cuts, his shirt in tatters, but he was breathing. "Tyler, hey, can you hear me?" I knelt beside him, keeping one eye on the door. His eyes fluttered but didn't open. He mumbled something I couldn't make out. "Where's Derek?" Grady asked, looking around the room. I followed his gaze to the pool of blood by the window. A trail led from there to the broken glass. "I think he went out the window," I said, "voluntarily or not." Grady moved to look outside, but I stopped him. "Don't. If she's out there..." He backed away from the window. "What do we do?" I checked Tyler's pulse. It was weak, but steady. "We need to get him to the medical station. Now." What about Derek? I looked at the blood trail leading to the window. There was so much of it. Too much. We'll come back for him. Tyler needs help first. Together, we carefully lifted Tyler. He was a dead weight between us, his head lolling forward. We maneuvered him through the door and down the hallway, following the exit signs. Every few steps, I'd stop and listen, half expecting to hear Sarah's footsteps behind us. The night air hit us as we pushed through the exit door. The quad was empty and silent, the medical station's lights visible across the open space. It would take us at least 5 minutes to get there, carrying Tyler between us. "Keep your eyes open," I told Grady. "If you see anything move, you tell me." We started across the quad, moving as fast as we could with Tyler between us. Every shadow seemed to shift and move. Every sound made me flinch. But we kept going, one step at a time, the medical station getting closer with each painful minute. I couldn't stop thinking about Derek. Was he still alive? Had he escaped through the window, or had Sarah dragged him out? And what the hell was Sarah anyway? Grady's words kept echoing in my head. She's not human. The medical station's lights grew brighter as we approached. Just a few more yards. My arms burned from carrying Tyler, and sweat ran down my back despite the cool night air. Grady was breathing hard beside me, the cuts on his face still seeping blood. We reached the door, and I kicked it open with my foot. "We need help," I shouted. The night medic, a guy I recognized but whose name I couldn't remember, jumped up from his desk. "What the hell?" he said, taking in the sight of us. Grady's slashed face, Tyler's unconscious form, and me still holding my weapon. "He needs help," I said. "Now." The medic snapped into action, helping us get Tyler onto a gurney. "What happened?" he asked, already cutting away Tyler's shirt to examine the wounds. "We were attacked," I said. "In our barracks." "By who?" I hesitated, looking at Grady. How could we explain Sarah? "Just get him stable," I said instead. "And call the MPs. We need to report this." The medic nodded and reached for the phone while continuing to work on Tyler. I stood there watching, my gun still in my hand, waiting for the MPs to arrive and trying to figure out what the hell I was going to tell them. I pushed open the common room door and felt my stomach drop. Tyler was lying on the floor beside an overturned table, his arm twisted at an angle that made me wince. Deep cuts covered his chest, his shirt soaked through with blood. He wasn't moving, but I could see his chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. "Tyler," I called out, scanning the room for Derek. There was no sign of him, just a dark pool of blood where I guessed he must have fallen and a trail of red leading to the window. The glass was shattered outward, jagged pieces still clinging to the frame. "Is he alive?" Grady asked from behind me, his voice shaking. The cuts on his face had stopped bleeding, but dried blood still covered the left side of his face. I knelt beside Tyler and pressed my fingers against his neck. "Yeah, he's got a pulse. It's weak, but it's there." I looked back at the broken window. Derek must have gone through there. Either he jumped or... I didn't finish the thought. We both knew what the alternative was. "We need to get Tyler to the medical station," I said, looking around the destroyed room. The furniture was tossed everywhere and blood spattered the walls and floor. "Can you help me carry him?" Grady nodded, still clutching the baseball bat I'd given him. "What about Derek?" "We'll come back for him after we get Tyler help," I said, though I wasn't sure what we'd find when we did. "Keep an eye on the door while I figure out how to move him." I examined Tyler more closely. His breathing was ragged, and those cuts on his chest looked deep. His right arm was definitely broken. The bone wasn't poking through the skin, but the unnatural angle told me everything I needed to know. "We need to be careful with his arm," I told Grady. "I'll take his shoulders, you get his legs." Grady positioned himself at Tyler's feet while I slid my hands under Tyler's shoulders. On 3, 1, 2, 3. We lifted him as gently as we could. Tyler groaned but didn't wake up, which was probably for the best. We maneuvered him through the doorway and down the hallway, following the blood trail in reverse. Every few steps I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see Sarah standing there with her too wide smile and those hands that weren't really hands anymore. "Keep moving," I said, more to myself than to Grady. We made it outside into the quad. The night air was cool, and the medical station's lights glowed in the distance. It couldn't have been more than a few hundred yards away, but it felt like miles with Tyler's weight between us. "You see anything?" I asked Grady, who kept looking around nervously. "No," he said, "but that doesn't mean she's not out here." We picked up our pace, moving as fast as we could without jostling Tyler too much. My arms were burning by the time we reached the medical station door. I kicked it with my foot since my hands were full. "Hello? We need help," I shouted. The door swung open, and the night medic, a guy named Alvin, stood there. His eyes widened when he saw us. "Jesus Christ," he said, stepping back to let us in. "What happened?" "He was attacked," I said, not wanting to get into details yet. "He's lost a lot of blood, and his arm's broken." Alvin directed us to put Tyler on the examination table. As soon as we set him down, Alvin started cutting away Tyler's shirt to get a better look at the wounds. "These are deep," he said, reaching for gauze pads. "Who did this?" "You need to call the MPs," I said, ignoring his question. "Right now." Alvin looked at me, then at Grady with his bloodied face, then back at Tyler. He nodded and picked up the phone on the wall. While he made the call, I stood by the door with my Beretta still in hand. Grady stayed close, gripping the baseball bat. "They're on their way," Alvin said, after hanging up. He went back to working on Tyler, applying pressure to the worst of the cuts. "You want to tell me what happened now?" I shook my head. "I'll tell the MPs when they get here." It felt like hours, but was probably only minutes before two military police officers arrived. One was a woman named Lauren, who I recognized from around base. The other was a guy I didn't know. "What's going on here?" Lauren asked, taking in the scene. Me with my gun, Grady with a bat and a bloody face, Tyler unconscious on the table. "We were attacked in our barracks," I said. "Barracks 6, common room. There's another soldier missing, Derek Chen. He might have gone out the window." The male MP, his name tag said Thornton, looked at my gun. "I'm going to need you to put that down, Rivera." I realized I was still holding the Beretta. I carefully placed it on a nearby counter, making sure the safety was on. "Now tell us exactly what happened," Lauren said. "We need to split them up." Thornton interrupted. "Standard procedure for witness statements." Lauren nodded. "Rivera, you come with me. Parsons, you go with Officer Thornton." I looked at Grady, who seemed reluctant to leave. "It's okay," I told him. "Just tell them everything you saw." Lauren took me to a small office at the back of the medical station while Thornton led Grady to another room. She pulled out a notepad and pen. "Start from the beginning," she said. So I did. I told her about Sarah showing up at our barracks, about how she knew things she shouldn't have known, about how I'd felt uncomfortable and left. I explained how Grady had woken me up, bleeding and terrified, and how we'd found Tyler in the common room. "Describe this Sarah person," Lauren said, her pen poised over the notepad. "Tall red hair, really pale skin," I said. She barely blinked, and there was something off about the way she moved. "What was she wearing?" I tried to remember. "Jeans and a dark top, I think. Nothing special." "Any distinguishing marks? Tattoos, scars?" I shook my head. "Not that I saw." Lauren kept asking questions about Sarah, her voice, her mannerisms, how she'd acted before I left. She seemed less interested in the attack itself and more focused on Sarah's appearance and behavior. After about 20 minutes of this, the door opened and an older man in civilian clothes walked in. He had gray hair and the kind of face that had seen too much. "I'm Investigator Warner," he said, showing me an ID. "Military Criminal Investigation Division." Lauren stood up. "Sir, I was just taking his statement." "I'll take it from here," Warner said. Lauren nodded and left the room. Warner sat down across from me and pulled out a folder. "Tell me about Sarah," he said without preamble. I sighed. I just went through all this with the MP. Tell me again, he said, his voice leaving no room for argument. So I repeated everything, Sarah's appearance, her behavior, the things she knew about us. Warner listened without interrupting, his face giving nothing away. When I finished, he opened his folder and pulled out a sketch. He slid it across the table to me. Is this her? I looked down at the drawing and felt a chill run through me. It was Sarah. The red hair, the pale skin, the eyes that didn't quite look right. The artist had captured something unsettling about her expression that I couldn't put into words. Yeah, I said. That's her. How did you get this so fast? Warner ignored my question. You're sure this is the woman you saw? Positive, I said. That's Sarah. Warner leaned back in his chair, studying me. What about her hands? Did you notice anything unusual about them? I thought about what Grady had told me, how her fingers had changed into something else, something that had sliced through Derek and Tyler like they were made of paper. I didn't see anything unusual, I said carefully, but Grady did. He said her hands changed. Changed how? Into claws or something. That's what he said caused those cuts on Tyler and on his own face. Warner nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something he already knew. And you're certain this woman called herself Sarah? Yes, I said, getting frustrated. Look, one of my friends is missing and another one is seriously hurt. Shouldn't you be focusing on finding Derek and figuring out who this Sarah person is? That's exactly what I'm doing, Specialist Rivera, Warner said. He pulled out more papers from his folder. Did Sarah mention anyone else on base? Did she ask about specific people or locations? I shook my head. No, she just asked about us, our backgrounds, our families. She knew things about Tyler's mom and Grady's sister that they hadn't told her. Warner made a note. And she arrived at approximately what time? Around 9, I said. And I left around 11. The attack must have happened sometime after that. Warner checked his watch, then gathered his papers. Wait here, he said, standing up. I need to speak with your friend Parsons. He left me alone in the office. Through the small window in the door, I could see people moving around in the main area of the medical station. More MPs had arrived, and someone was taking photos. I wondered if they'd found Derek yet. After what felt like forever, Warner returned. He sat down and placed a new set of papers in front of him. There's something you should know, he said. While Sarah was in your barracks, she was also seen at the motor pool at 10:30. Security cameras caught her at the commissary at 11, and an MP reported seeing her near base housing at 2:30 in the morning. I stared at him. That's impossible. Is it? Warner asked, his expression unreadable. It had to be different women, I said. Maybe they just looked similar. Warner shook his head. There's more. A soldier was killed in his quarters across base last night. PFC James Morrison. Time of death between 2 and 3 in the morning, exactly when your friends were attacked. My mouth went dry. Killed how? Warner hesitated, then pulled out a photograph and placed it on the table. I immediately wished he hadn't. The image showed a body so torn apart it barely looked human. The wounds were similar to Tyler's, but far worse, like someone had taken a chainsaw to the poor guy. Jesus, I whispered, looking away. Those are claw marks, Warner said, but no animal could do that kind of damage. I pushed the photo back toward him. What the hell is going on? Warner collected the photo and put it back in his folder. That's what we're trying to figure out. Here's the interesting part. We've interviewed several witnesses who saw Sarah last night. Some say she had black hair. Others swear it was blonde. You're certain she had red hair? Absolutely, I said. I was sitting across from her for over an hour. And yet, Warner continued, some describe her as short, others as tall. Some say she was heavy-set, others say thin. The descriptions vary wildly. I didn't know what to say to that. It made no sense. One more thing, Warner said. Did Sarah touch any of you before the attack? Shake hands? Pat someone on the shoulder? Anything like that? I thought back. She handed Grady a beer. He said her hand felt cold. Warner nodded, making another note. I'm going to need you to remain on base for the foreseeable future, Specialist Rivera. We'll have more questions. What about Derek? I asked. Are you looking for him? We have people searching the area around your barracks, Warner said, standing up. That's all I can tell you right now. He gathered his papers and headed for the door. Wait, I called after him. What is she? Sarah, I mean. Warner paused with his hand on the doorknob. For a moment, I thought he might actually tell me something useful. But then his professional mask slipped back into place. That's classified, he said, and walked out, leaving me alone with more questions than answers. I sat there in that small office, trying to make sense of everything Warner had told me. Sarah in multiple places at once, wildly different descriptions from witnesses, a soldier dead across base with wounds like Tyler's but worse. And through it all, the MPs seemed more interested in Sarah than in helping my friends. Something was very wrong here, and I had a feeling this was just the beginning. I stared at the sketch in Warner's hands, my stomach dropping. The face looking back at me was unmistakable. Those eyes that never seemed to blink enough. That unnervingly perfect smile. Yeah, that's her, I said, my voice sounding hollow, even to my own ears. That's Sarah. Warner nodded slowly, making a note on his clipboard. You're certain? 100%. That's the woman who came to our barracks last night. Warner exchanged a look with Officer Thornton, who stood by the door. Something passed between them, the kind of silent communication that told me they knew more than they were letting on. What? I asked. What aren't you telling me? Warner hesitated, then pulled out 3 more papers from his folder. According to our reports, at 10:30 last night, while you say this woman was in your barracks, she was also spotted by 2 mechanics at the motor pool on the other side of base. That's impossible, I said. She was with us. Tyler was talking to her. At 11, security cameras captured her at the commissary, Warner continued, sliding a grainy black and white photo across the desk. The image quality was poor, but I could make out a woman's figure near the entrance. And at 2:30 this morning, one of our MPs reported seeing her walking through base housing. I shook my head. No way, that can't be right. 3 different locations, 3 different times, all while she was supposedly with you and your friends. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. Maybe it's someone who looks like her, a twin or something? Warner didn't respond to my suggestion. Instead, he pulled out another folder, this one marked with red tape. There's more. At approximately 2 to 3 this morning, around the same time your friends were attacked, we had another incident. He slid several photos across the table. I picked them up, then immediately wished I hadn't. They showed a body, or what was left of one. The victim lay on a blood-soaked bed, chest torn open with deep gashes that looked like they'd been made by claws, just like Tyler's wounds, but so much worse. The face was barely recognizable as human. Jesus Christ, I muttered, putting the photos down and looking away. Who is that? PFC James Morrison, found in his quarters across base this morning by his roommate. The time of death lines up exactly with when your friends were attacked. I felt sick. The room seemed to tilt slightly as I tried to process what I was seeing. And you think Sarah did this? We're trying to determine that, Warner said carefully. But there's another complication. What's that? The descriptions we're getting of this woman, they don't match up. At all. He pulled out a stack of witness statements. The mechanics at the motor pool described a woman with black hair, about 5'4". The MP who saw her at housing described a tall blonde woman, and you're telling me she had red hair. She did have red hair, I insisted. Bright red, and she was tall, maybe 5'10" or 5'11", pale skin, really pale. And her eyes. I trailed off, remembering how they seemed to change color in different lighting. What about her eyes? Warner pressed. They were... I don't know. They seemed different depending on how you looked at them. I was aware of how crazy this sounded. Look, I know what I saw. We all saw the same person. Warner leaned back in his chair. That's just it. Everyone is absolutely certain about what they saw, but the descriptions contradict each other completely. Height, hair color, eye color, even approximate age. Nothing matches except for the name Sarah. I ran my hands through my hair, trying to make sense of it all. So what are you saying? That there are multiple women named Sarah running around base attacking people? I'm not saying anything definitive at this point, Warner replied carefully. We're gathering information. Have you found Derek? I asked, suddenly remembering my missing friend. Warner shook his head. Not yet. We have teams searching the area around your barracks. The blood trail leads about 50 yards into the woods behind your building, then disappears. I thought about Derek, always taking selfies, always the first to try something new. The idea that he might be lying somewhere hurt or worse made my chest tighten. What about the window? I asked. The one that was broken in our common room. Did anyone check for, I don't know, fingerprints or something? Forensics is processing everything, Warner assured me. But so far, we haven't found anything useful. No fingerprints, no hair samples, nothing that would help us identify who or what did this. The way he said what made me look up sharply. You don't think it was a person? Warner didn't answer directly. Instead, he asked, Did you notice anything unusual about this woman? Anything that seemed off? I thought about how Sarah had known our names without us telling her. How she knew about Tyler's mom and Grady's sister. How her hand had felt cold when she passed Grady a beer. She knew things she shouldn't have known, I said slowly. Personal stuff about us that we hadn't told her. And she moved weird. Too smooth, like she was, I don't know, gliding or something. Warner nodded, making more notes. Anything else? She didn't want to be in Derek's photo. Said she didn't photograph well. I paused, remembering something else. And she barely blinked. I know that sounds stupid, but it was creepy as hell. Not stupid at all, Warner murmured, still writing. I looked at the photos of Morrison again, forcing myself to study the wounds. They were identical to Tyler's, long, deep gashes that no human could have made. But Morrison's were so much worse, like whatever had attacked him had taken its time. What could do this? I asked quietly. These aren't knife wounds. No, Warner agreed. They're not. So what are they? Animal attacks? But what animal could get into the barracks without anyone noticing? Warner gathered the photos and put them back in the folder. We're still investigating. For now, I need you to stay on base. No leaves, no passes. We'll need to talk to you again. Am I under arrest? No. But you're a key witness in what's now a homicide investigation. Warner stood up. Officer Thornton will take you back to temporary quarters. We've arranged for you and Parsons to stay in the visitor barracks until we clear your rooms. I stood up too, my legs feeling unsteady. What about Tyler? Is he going to be okay? He's being transferred to the hospital for surgery. His injuries are severe, but the doctors think he'll pull through. That was something, at least. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As Thornton led me out of the office, I glanced back at Warner, who was staring at the sketch of Sarah with an expression I couldn't read. Something told me he knew more than he was saying, a lot more. The visitor barracks were basic, but clean. 2 beds, a small bathroom, and a desk. Grady was already there when I arrived, sitting on one of the beds with fresh bandages on his face. He looked up when I walked in, his eyes hollow. What did they tell you? He asked. I sat down on the other bed. Not much, but there's been another attack. AI sat down on the other bed. Not much, but there's been another attack. A soldier named Morrison was killed last night. Same kind of wounds as Tyler, but worse. Grady's face went pale under his bandages. Shit. Did they find Derek? No. Blood trail went into the woods and then just stopped. I rubbed my face, feeling the stubble that had grown since yesterday. But that's not even the weirdest part. They're saying Sarah was seen in 3 different places at the same time last night. What? That's impossible. Yeah, that's what I said. But they've got witnesses and even security camera footage. I leaned forward, lowering my voice even though we were alone. And get this, everyone describes her differently. Some say she had black hair, others say blonde. Different heights, different everything, but they all call her Sarah. Grady stared at me, his hand unconsciously touching the bandages on his face. What the hell is going on? I don't know, man. I stood up and paced the small room. The investigator, Warner, he was asking weird questions, like he wasn't surprised by any of this. You think they know something? About what she is? I stopped pacing. What do you mean, what she is? Grady looked down at his hands. You saw what she did to Tyler, to me. Those weren't human hands, Marcus. Whatever she is, she's not like us. I wanted to argue, to say that there had to be a rational explanation, but the image of Morrison's body flashed in my mind. No human could have done that. Did you tell them? I asked. About her changing? Yeah, they didn't seem shocked, just took notes and asked more questions. Grady looked up at me. They asked if I'd been drinking, if I might have hallucinated it. What did you say? I told them to look at my face and tell me if I hallucinated these. He gestured to his bandages. They shut up after that. I sat back down, feeling exhausted. We'd been up all night and the adrenaline was wearing off, leaving me drained. But I couldn't imagine sleeping, not with everything that had happened. You should try to rest, I told Grady. I'll keep watch. He nodded, lying back on the bed without bothering to take off his shoes. Within minutes, his breathing had slowed, and I knew he was asleep. I sat at the small desk, staring out the window at the base. It was mid-morning now, and everything looked normal. Soldiers walking between buildings, vehicles moving along the roads. It was hard to believe that just hours ago, something had attacked my friends and killed a man across base. A knock at the door made me jump. I opened it to find Officer Thornton standing there with 2 trays of food. Thought you might be hungry, he said, handing them to me. Thanks. I took the trays, balancing them awkwardly. Any news about Derek? Thornton shook his head. Still looking. Warner wants to see you again at 1400 hours. Just you, not Parsons. Why just me? Don't know. Those are my orders. He glanced past me at Grady's sleeping form. How's he doing? As well as can be expected, I guess. Thornton nodded. I'll come get you at 13:45. After he left, I set the trays down and checked my watch. That gave me about 3 hours. I ate mechanically, not tasting the food, then tried to rest. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sarah's face changing, her fingers elongating into claws. Eventually, I gave up and just sat by the window, watching the base and trying to make sense of everything. Nothing added up. How could Sarah be in multiple places at once? Why did everyone see her differently? And what the hell had she done to Morrison and nearly done to Tyler? At 13:45 exactly, Thornton knocked on the door. Grady was still asleep, so I left him a note saying I'd be back soon, then followed Thornton across the base to the administration building. This time, Warner wasn't alone. A woman in civilian clothes sat beside him, her dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. She didn't introduce herself when I entered, just watched me with sharp eyes as I sat down. Thanks for coming, Rivera, Warner said, as if I had a choice. We have some additional questions. Have you found Derek? I asked immediately. No, Warner admitted. But we're still searching. The woman leaned forward. Mr. Rivera, I'd like to ask you about Sarah's behavior. Did you notice anything unusual about the way she moved or spoke?" I glanced at Warner, who nodded slightly. "Like I said before, she moved too smoothly, and she spoke, I don't know, too perfectly, like she was choosing each word carefully." "Did she use contractions when she spoke?" the woman asked. The question caught me off guard. "What?" "Contractions. Words like don't instead of do not, can't instead of cannot." I thought back to our conversations with Sarah. No, I don't think she did. She spoke very formally, I guess. The woman made a note on her pad. And her questions. What kinds of things was she asking about? Our unit, mostly. Where we'd been deployed. Who our commanding officers were. I paused, remembering. She seemed really interested in who had access to different areas of the base. Warner and the woman exchanged a look. "What?" I asked. "What does that mean?" "Just one more question," the woman said, ignoring mine. "Did Sarah ever mention looking for someone specific?" I frowned, trying to remember. Not directly, but at one point she asked if we knew everyone in our battalion. Like she was trying to find someone but didn't want to say who. The woman sat back, her expression unreadable. "Thank you, Mr. Rivera. That's helpful." Warner slid a form across the desk. "I need you to sign this. It's a non-disclosure agreement." I picked it up, skimming the dense legal text. "What is this?" "It means you don't discuss what happened with anyone outside this investigation. Not your family, not your friends, not other soldiers. No one." "Why? What are you trying to hide?" The woman spoke up. "We're not hiding anything, Mr. Rivera. We're trying to prevent panic while we complete our investigation." I looked between them, then down at the form again. "And if I don't sign? Then we'll have to consider you uncooperative in an active military investigation," Warner said, his tone making it clear what that would mean for my career. I signed the form, pushing it back across the desk. "There. Happy?" "Thank you for your cooperation," the woman said, standing up. "Officer Thornton will take you back to your quarters now." As I stood to leave, Warner called after me. "Rivera, one more thing." I turned back. "If you see her again, Sarah or anyone who makes you feel the same way she did, don't approach. Don't engage. Call this number immediately." He handed me a card with a single phone number printed on it. No name, no agency, nothing else. I took the card, slipping it into my pocket. "What is she, really?" Warner's face gave nothing away. "We're still determining that. Good day, Rivera." Thornton escorted me back to the visitor barracks in silence. My mind was racing with questions. The woman's interest in Sarah's speech patterns, the non-disclosure agreement, the mysterious phone number. It all pointed to something bigger than just a random attack. When I got back to the room, Grady was awake, sitting on the edge of his bed. "What did they want?" he asked as soon as I closed the door. I hesitated, thinking about the non-disclosure agreement I'd just signed. But this was Grady. He'd been there. He'd been attacked. He deserved to know. They had more questions about Sarah, weird ones, about how she talked and moved. I sat down across from him. And they made me sign something saying I wouldn't talk about any of this. Grady's eyes widened. "They made me sign one too, while you were gone. Some officer came by with the papers." "They're covering something up," I said quietly. "They know what she is." "But what is she?" Grady asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I shook my head. "I don't know. But whatever it is, it's not human, and I think she's still out there, looking for whoever she came here to find." The thought sent a chill through me. Somewhere on this base, Sarah, or whatever she really was, could be hunting her next victim. And we had no idea who that might be, or how to stop her. As night fell, we sat in silence, both lost in our own thoughts. The bass grew quiet outside our window, but neither of us suggested turning in. I don't think either of us wanted to close our eyes, afraid of what we might see in our dreams, or what might be there when we opened them again. I spent the next 2 months feeling like I was trapped in some kind of nightmare that wouldn't end. The questions never stopped coming. Every day it seemed like there was another MP or intelligence officer waiting to talk to me, asking the same things over and over until I could recite my answers in my sleep. "Describe her again," they'd say. "What exactly did she look like? What did she say to you? Did she mention any specific locations? Did she ask about anyone in particular?" I told them everything I could remember about that night. How Sarah had just shown up at our door, how she knew things about us she shouldn't have known, how she barely blinked when she talked. I described her red hair, her pale skin, the way she moved that didn't seem quite right. But no matter how many times I went through it all, they never seemed satisfied. The worst part was that nobody would tell me anything. I kept asking about Derek. Had they found him? Was he alive? But all I got were blank stares or the same rehearsed line. That information is part of an ongoing investigation. After about 3 weeks, a new guy showed up. He wore a suit instead of a uniform and introduced himself as Special Investigator Haynes from Washington. He didn't look like military, more like FBI or something similar. He had this way of staring that made me feel like he was trying to see inside my head. "I'd like to talk about Sarah's speech patterns," he said during our first meeting. We were sitting in a small room with no windows in the administration building. Was there anything unusual about the way she spoke? I thought about it. Yeah, actually. She talked kind of formal, like someone who learned English from textbooks. She didn't use contractions much. Haynes wrote something down in his notebook. And her questions, what kinds of things was she asking about? She wanted to know about our unit, our commanding officers. She asked Tyler about his mom in California, knew Grady had a sister in Georgia, stuff we hadn't told her. Did she seem to be looking for someone specific? That question caught me off guard. I don't know. Maybe. She kept focusing on Tyler toward the end. Haynes nodded like I'd confirmed something he already suspected. "And you're certain about her appearance? Red hair, pale skin?" "Yes, definitely. Bright red hair. Really pale, like she never went outside." He showed me the same sketch Warner had shown me before. "This is her?" "That's her," I said, but I already told Warner that. Haynes closed his notebook. "People see different things sometimes, Mr. Rivera. Memory is unreliable." I leaned forward. "Look, I know what I saw, and I know what happened to my friends wasn't normal. Something's going on, and nobody will tell me anything." "That's because there's nothing to tell," he said, but his eyes said something different. "The investigation is ongoing." I visited Tyler in the hospital whenever they let me. He looked terrible, his arm in a cast, bandages covering most of his chest and neck. The doctors said he'd lost a lot of blood and had nerve damage in his left arm. He might never regain full use of it. The first week, he was barely conscious. By the second week, he could talk a little, but he didn't remember much about what happened after I left the room that night. Just fragments. Sarah's face changing, her hands becoming something else, Derek crashing through the window. "Did they find him?" Tyler asked me, his voice barely above a whisper. I shook my head. "They won't tell me anything." Grady and I compared notes whenever we could. His face was healing, but the doctors said he'd have scars for life. 3 long lines running from his forehead down across his cheek. He'd been questioned just as much as I had, maybe more. "They keep asking if I'm sure about what I saw," Grady told me one night when we snuck out to smoke behind the barracks. "Like, they're trying to get me to say I was drunk and imagine the whole thing." "Same here," I said. "But they know something." That Haynes guy. He didn't seem surprised by anything I told him. I heard one of the MPs talking about something similar happening at Fort Benning last year, Grady said, keeping his voice low. Some woman showing up, a soldier ending up dead. You think it's connected? Grady took a long drag of his cigarette. Has to be. This wasn't random, Marcus. She was looking for something, or someone. After about 6 weeks, the questions finally started to slow down. The official report came out, classifying the incident as unsolved assault by unknown assailant. Derek was listed as AWOL, which was complete bullshit. Nobody goes AWOL by jumping through a window covered in their own blood. Then came the transfers. I got orders for Fort Hood. Grady was sent to Fort Bragg. Tyler, once he was well enough to travel, was assigned to a medical unit in Germany. They were splitting us up, and it wasn't hard to figure out why. Before we all went our separate ways, the three of us met one last time at a bar off base. Tyler's arm was still in a sling, and he moved carefully, like everything hurt. Grady's scars were red and angry against his skin. We looked like survivors of something terrible, which we were. They made me sign another non-disclosure agreement yesterday, Tyler said, nursing a beer with his good hand. Said I could face court-martial if I talked about what happened to anyone. Same here, Grady nodded. Military intelligence came by this morning, made it very clear that discussing the incident would be considered a breach of national security. I shook my head. What the hell are they covering up? It's like they know exactly what Sarah is, but they don't want anyone else to know. Maybe she's some kind of experiment gone wrong, Tyler suggested. Government project or something. Or maybe she's not human at all, Grady said quietly. We all fell silent at that. It was what we were all thinking but hadn't wanted to say out loud. Whatever she is, I said finally. She's still out there. We finished our drinks in silence after that. I completed my service 14 months later and didn't re-enlist. I couldn't stay in the military, not after what happened. I needed to get away, start fresh somewhere else. I told myself that maybe, with enough time and distance, I could convince myself that we'd all been mistaken somehow. Maybe we had been drunker than we thought that night. Maybe Sarah was just some mentally ill woman who'd wandered onto the base. Maybe the multiple sightings were just different women who looked similar. Maybe Derek had just run away. I tried to believe these things. I really did. Sometimes when I was busy with my new civilian job or out with new friends who knew nothing about my past, I could almost make myself believe it. But then I'd wake up at 3 a.m, drenched in sweat, with the image of Sarah's face burned into my mind. I'd remember the look in Grady's eyes when he pounded on my door, blood streaming down his face. I'd think about Derek and wonder if he was still alive somewhere, or if his body was rotting in those woods where the blood trail had ended. And I knew better. Deep down, I knew what we'd seen that night wasn't something that could be explained away with rational explanations. Sarah wasn't human. And whatever she was still out there, probably still hunting. Sometimes I'd catch myself scanning crowds, looking for a flash of red hair or a face that was too pale. I'd installed extra locks on my apartment door and kept a baseball bat beside my bed. Old habits from the military died hard. I always sat with my back to the wall in restaurants, always checked the exits when I entered a room. Because no matter how much I tried to convince myself otherwise, I knew the truth. Sarah was real. What she did to my friends was real. And the worst part was knowing that nobody would believe me if I ever told them what really happened that night. So I kept it to myself and tried to move on with my life. But I never stopped looking over my shoulder. I couldn't escape the memories even years later. The nightmares still came at least once a week. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, seeing Sarah's face, those eyes that never seemed to blink enough. I'd hear Derek's screams echoing from that broken window. The therapist I saw for 6 months kept telling me it would get better with time. She was wrong. I'd moved to Cincinnati about 18 months after everything went down. It was far enough from any military base that I figured I could start fresh. Nobody knew me there. Nobody knew what had happened. I got a job in logistics for a manufacturing company. Nothing exciting, just tracking shipments and managing inventory. Normal stuff. Safe stuff. My apartment was small but decent. I had a routine. Work, gym, home. Sometimes I'd grab a beer at this little bar down the street. I didn't make many friends, but I was okay with that. Keeping to myself felt safer, somehow. For almost 3 years, I managed to convince myself that what happened that night wasn't real. That Sarah was just some psycho who'd targeted us. That the military's secrecy was just their standard procedure for covering their asses. That Derek had just run off somewhere. I almost believed it. Then I saw her. It was a Tuesday evening at Kroger. I was in the produce section trying to figure out if the avocados were ripe enough, just a normal shopping trip. I looked up, and there she was, standing across from me, examining apples like she was looking for the perfect one. Sarah. Exactly the same. Tall, with that bright red hair and skin so pale it looked like she'd never seen the sun. She wore a simple blue dress, casual but somehow not quite right, like she was trying to copy what normal people wore. I froze. My whole body went cold. The avocado I was holding dropped to the floor. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. It was like being underwater, everything muffled and distant. She must have felt me staring because she started to turn her head toward me. I backed away, bumping into a display of oranges. They tumbled to the floor, rolling everywhere. People turned to look. When I glanced back at the apples, Sarah was gone. I abandoned my cart and got the hell out of there. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely get my keys into the ignition. I kept checking the rearview mirror the whole drive home, convinced she was following me. When I got to my apartment, I locked the door, then checked all the windows. I pulled the blind shut. I grabbed a kitchen knife and sat on my couch, staring at the door for hours. Around midnight, when my heart finally stopped racing, I realized I needed to call Grady. We hadn't talked in months. Last I heard, he was living in Florida, working construction. I still had his number, though I'd been careful not to contact him too often. We'd all agreed. It was safer that way. He answered on the 4th ring, his voice thick with sleep. "Hello? Grady, it's Marcus." There was a pause. "Marcus? What time is it?" "I saw her," I said, not bothering with small talk. "I saw Sarah." The silence on the other end told me everything. When he finally spoke, his voice was different. Alert. Afraid. "Where?" "At the grocery store, tonight. She looked exactly the same, Grady, exactly the same as that night." I heard him exhale slowly. "I saw her too, about 3 months ago at a gas station outside Tampa. I was pumping gas and she was across the street, just standing there, watching me." My stomach dropped. "What did you do?" "Got in my truck and drove. Didn't stop for 200 miles, moved the next day." We were both quiet for a moment. Then Grady cleared his throat. "There's something else you should know. Tyler's dead." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. "What? When? How?" 6 months ago. Official cause was suicide. Hung himself in his apartment in Germany. "Jesus," I whispered. "You don't think he actually—" "His girlfriend called me after it happened." Grady cut in. She said Tyler had been acting strange for weeks. Paranoid. Not sleeping. Said he kept seeing a woman with red hair watching his apartment building. The police found the door unlocked when they got there. I felt sick. It was her. She found him first. "Yeah," Grady said quietly. "I think so." "What the hell is she, Grady? What does she want?" "I don't know, but I think she's hunting us, all of us who were there that night." I thought about Derek, who'd never been found. About Tyler. About the scratches on Grady's face that had scarred into 3 long lines running from his forehead to his jaw. "We need to meet up," I said. "Compare notes. Figure this out." "No," Grady said firmly. "We need to stay apart. Make it harder for her to find us all. You need to leave wherever you are right now, tonight." He was right. I knew he was right. "Call me when you're somewhere new," he said. "Use a burner phone if you can." After we hung up, I didn't waste any time. I grabbed a duffel bag and threw in clothes, toiletries, my laptop, and the baseball bat I kept beside my bed. I took all the cash I had, about $400, and my gun from the lockbox in my closet. I'd bought it legally after moving to Cincinnati, telling myself it was just for protection. Normal protection from normal threats. I left most of my stuff behind. It didn't matter. None of it mattered if she found me. The night was cold as I threw my bag in the trunk and got into my car. I kept checking the shadows, half expecting to see her standing there, watching me with those eyes that never seemed quite right. I drove for about an hour, no real destination in mind, just away from my apartment. Eventually, I pulled into a motel off the highway, one of those places with exterior doors and flickering neon signs. The kind of place where nobody asks questions. The night clerk barely looked at me as I paid cash for a room. I took the key, an actual metal key, not a card, and drove around to the back of the building. Room 17 was at the end of the row, away from the other occupied rooms. Inside, I put the chain on the door and pushed the dresser in front of it for good measure. I checked the bathroom, the closet, under the bed. I put my gun on the nightstand and the bat beside the bed. Then I sat on the edge of the mattress, staring at the door, listening to every sound from outside. I knew I wouldn't sleep. Not tonight. Maybe not for a long time. Because now I knew the truth. She was real. She was out there. And she was coming for me. Whatever Sarah was, whatever she wanted, she wasn't going to stop until she found me. I'd been staying in motels for a week, moving every night, never sleeping more than a few hours at a time. I kept seeing her everywhere, in the lobby, at the vending machines, walking past my window. Maybe it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. Maybe I was losing my mind. But I couldn't take that chance. After 7 days of this, I was running low on cash. I needed to go back to my apartment, at least to grab more clothes and my emergency fund. I figured I could be in and out in 10 minutes. Just grab what I needed and disappear again. I parked a block away and walked to my building, scanning every face I passed. The familiar weight of my gun pressed against my lower back, tucked into my jeans. I took the stairs instead of the elevator, less chance of getting trapped. When I reached my floor, I moved quietly down the hallway. Everything seemed normal. No one around. I got to my door and immediately noticed something wrong. The deadbolt was unlocked. I always locked it. Always. I stood there for a long moment, my hand hovering near the doorknob. I could just leave. Walk away right now. But I needed my stuff, and I needed to know what I was dealing with. I pulled out my gun, took a deep breath, and pushed the door open slowly with my foot. The smell hit me first, metallic and sharp. Blood. The lights were off, but enough sunlight filtered through the blinds for me to see what had happened to my apartment. Long, deep scratch marks covered every wall. Not random, methodical, like someone had taken their time dragging claws from ceiling to floor in perfectly spaced lines. My furniture was still there, untouched. Nothing seemed stolen. This wasn't a robbery. I moved through the living room, gun raised, checking corners and closets. The kitchen was the same, scratch marks on every surface. My bedroom too, but it was the bathroom that made my stomach drop. On the mirror, written in what looked like dried blood, were 2 words: "Found you." I backed out of the bathroom, my heart hammering in my chest. I needed to get out. Now. I grabbed my duffel bag from the closet and stuffed it with whatever clothes I could reach. I went to my dresser and pulled out the fake bottom of the top drawer, taking the stack of cash I kept for emergencies, about $2,000. I grabbed my passport, an extra phone charger, and my laptop. As I was about to leave, I remembered the photo album in my nightstand. I yanked open the drawer and took it. It had pictures of my family, of my time in the Army with Tyler, Grady, and Derek. I couldn't leave it behind. I was out of the apartment in under 5 minutes. I didn't bother locking the door behind me. In my car, I sat for a moment, trying to think. Where could I go? Not another motel. That clearly wasn't working. I needed someone who understood what was happening, someone who would believe me. Grady. He was in Florida now. He'd mentioned moving there after his discharge, said something about his cousin having a place near Tampa. I still had his number. I called him from the car. "Hello?" His voice was cautious. "Grady, it's Marcus." "Marcus? Jesus, man. I was just thinking about you. Are you okay?" "No. She found me, Sarah. She was in my apartment." A long pause. "You need to come here, now. That's why I'm calling. I need your address." He gave it to me, then added, "Drive safe, but drive fast. And Marcus, don't stop for anything." The drive to Florida took me 16 hours. I only stopped for gas and coffee, and each time I felt exposed, vulnerable. I kept checking my rearview mirror, scanning faces at the gas stations. Every red-headed woman made my heart stop. I reached Grady's place, just after noon the next day. It was a small house in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing special. Grady was waiting on the porch. The scars on his face had faded to 3 pale lines running from his forehead to his jaw. He looked older, harder. He hugged me tight when I got out of the car. "You look like shit," he said. "Feel like it too." He helped me bring my stuff inside. The house was simple but clean: a couch, a TV, a small kitchen. Normal, safe. "Come see this," he said, leading me to the garage. He opened the door and I stopped in my tracks. The garage had been converted into what looked like a research center or something from a detective show. 3 walls were covered with newspaper clippings, printouts, maps with pins, and photographs connected by red string. A desk with a computer sat in the corner, surrounded by stacks of books and folders. "What the hell is all this?" I asked. "Research." Grady walked over to one of the walls. After what happened, after Tyler, I needed answers, so I started digging. I moved closer to examine the wall. The newspaper clippings dated back decades. Headlines jumped out at me. "Mysterious attack leaves 3 dead. Woman sought in connection with brutal murder. Witness reports seeing suspect in 2 places at once." Jesus, Grady. How long have you been doing this? "Since I got here. About a year." He pointed to a section of the wall. "Look at these." The articles he indicated all described similar attacks. A strange woman appears, victims suffer deep claw-like wounds, and, in several cases, witnesses reported seeing the woman in multiple locations simultaneously. "The descriptions vary," Grady explained. "Sometimes she's described as having red hair, sometimes black, sometimes blonde. Different heights, different builds, but the pattern is the same." I felt cold. "What is she?" "I don't know, but I found reports going back to the 1950s, maybe earlier." "And the military knows about this?" Grady nodded. "Has to. Why else make us sign those NDAs? Why separate us after it happened?" I sat down heavily in a chair. "What about survivors? Are there any?" "A few." Grady pulled out a folder. "From what I can tell, the only people who survive are the ones who run immediately, like you did that first night." The guilt I'd carried for months twisted in my gut. "I left you guys, and that's why you're alive." Grady's voice was firm. "Tyler stayed, Derek stayed, I stayed. Look what happened to us." I thought about Tyler, about his suicide, about Derek, still missing, about the scars on Grady's face. "So what do we do?" I asked. "We stay together. We keep researching. And we stay alert." He patted a shotgun leaning against the desk. "I've got cameras outside, motion sensors. We'll take turns keeping watch at night." That night, I slept on Grady's couch while he took first watch. Despite my exhaustion, I kept jerking awake, thinking I heard something. Around 3 in the morning, Grady woke me for my shift. I sat by the window with his shotgun across my lap, watching the empty street until dawn. The second night was the same. We took turns sleeping and watching. During the day, we pored over Grady's research, looking for patterns, for weaknesses, for anything that might help us understand what we were dealing with. On the third night, I fell into a deeper sleep than usual. When I woke, the house was quiet. Too quiet. "Grady?" I called out. No answer. I got up, grabbing the baseball bat I kept next to the couch. The chair by the window was empty. Grady wasn't there. "Grady!" I called again, moving through the house. Kitchen empty. Bathroom empty. His bedroom door was open, the bed untouched. Then I noticed the front door. It was open, just a crack. I approached it slowly, bat raised. I pushed it open with my foot. The front yard was empty. The street was quiet. No sign of Grady. "Grady!" I shouted, not caring if I woke the neighbors. Something on the lawn caught my eye. I moved closer. It was Grady's phone, lying in the grass. I picked it up. The screen was still lit, showing a text message. "It wasn't Sarah. That's just what Sarah looks like to you." I stared at the message, my blood turning to ice. What did that mean? That Sarah wasn't her real name? That she looked different to different people? Then it hit me. The varying descriptions in the reports, the witnesses seeing her in multiple places at once. Whatever this thing was, it could appear as anyone. It could be anywhere. I looked up at the dark street, at the houses with their windows like eyes. It could be watching me right now. It could look like anyone. I ran back inside, grabbed my duffel bag, and threw in whatever I could reach. I was in my car 3 minutes later, driving away from Grady's house. Away from whatever had taken him. As the miles stretched between us, a terrible truth settled over me. I would never be free from this thing. It had found me once. It would find me again. All I could do was keep running.